Hello, welcome to a new video. Deeply apologize for not uploading yesterday, but I forgot, got tired, and didn't make one. So I'll upload a video today. Also, since I forgot yesterday, it'll be two videos today. Hope you enjoy. So let's talk about the problems with adultery. Now, adultery is essentially just cheating on a spouse or a person you're in a relationship with, monogamous. In an open relationship, it isn't technically adultery because, it's open, but that is subject to debate, as one may say an open relationship by definition cannot exist. I'd argue it can, it's just wrong, but some people hold it as negative, and so it shall be acknowledged as such. But when you have an exclusive relationship with your partner, what is the problem with breaking that trust? Well, as I already mentioned, the trust is broken. It's a lot harder to have a relationship built on cooperation when there isn't trust. It creates a sort of prisoner's dilemma. Think about it. If you want something and your spouse wants something, if you work together, you could theoretically get it, but why would you trust your spouse to do something when they clearly have no interest in actually working with you and actually trusting you as a person? Well, there is none. After all, they clearly don't trust you. Why should you trust them? And thus, it breaks down the bonds that make a relationship function. Because again, if they're going to break their relationship with you, ignore all the agreements that they made to you, why would you expect them to do anything for you? It makes no sense. And then, of course, there's another problem. When one partner is unfaithful, contract between the two is broken. That is where the trust is coming from and why it breaks. See, when you enter an agreement with someone, you're effectively entering a contract with them. You make an agreement, both sides agree to terms, and they work together. It doesn't necessarily have to be a written contract, like people actually do that, and I can understand why. It's good to get it on paper, especially if your memory sucks. I'll be honest, mine does, so I can get it. It may look stupid, but it does make sense in certain contexts. But when you're in a relationship, that contract, physical or not, exists. There's an understanding of expectations of cooperation, and of basically agreeing on what you're gonna do and what you're not gonna do. Also, deeply apologize if you hear any noise. I am currently by a road. It's kind of how buildings work. Regardless, when you have that contract and it is broken through adultery, it creates a very real problem because everything in that contract, respecting boundaries, agreeing on chores, agreeing on what you're gonna do when it comes to the other and what you need to handle, basically goes out the window. Because contracts kind of become null and void the moment they're broken. That is pretty much the entire point. If someone, for example, has a contract, I'll just use business as an easy one, where they pay $500 to get some supplies, right? Simple transaction. Sign contract, but the person doesn't pay the money. Those supplies don't get transferred. If you are one side of a party and the other side breaks their end of the bargain, you're under no obligation to give them your side, because they already broke their end of the deal, so yours falls too. And thus, any structure that the relationship has falls apart. And since relationships, especially, are trust-based, when the trust falls, the contract makes even less sense and functions even worse than if it was just a standard transaction. Because you can't exactly salvage time wasted. You can't exactly get back all the time you spent in that relationship because, well, it's time. Time just is spent. It's not like supplies, which you can maybe salvage by reselling. It's just gone. And also, another thing to note for those who are the ones who are being cheated with, what one might call a homewrecker, those who the partner uses to commit such adultery become essentially pieces of meat to said person. Think about it. When you are engaging in adultery, do you really see them as a person? I mean, you might. It's unlikely, but you might. And importantly, it's very unlikely that they don't just become a piece of meat to you because you're using them for pleasure. There's no actual commitment there. I mean, if there was commitment, you'd be doing it with your actual partner you have a relationship with already, who has established trust in you and who you know better. This is purely lust. This is purely a transactional situation where you want joy, the other person does, so basically you're doing it just as a means to an end, to get pleasure. They're thus a piece of meat. they could be replaced with theoretically anyone. So long as they get that pleasure, they are more than happy to do it. And so you become a transactional piece, easily exchanged, which creates major problems. It also means if, say, someone gets pregnant or someone gets an STD, it becomes a very easy time to just drop them, ignore them, ghost them. Essentially, you put yourself in a very, very precarious situation as the homewrecker. Or as the cheater, really, but the homewrecker especially, because you can essentially be toyed with, ditched, and left for nothing. And that's not a good position to be in. And as mentioned earlier, the risk of spreading diseases, sexually transmitted diseases or STDs, becomes exponentially higher. Because remember, if you're sleeping around, well, if one person happens to have that disease and it's caught by one of the other people, then it spreads. And if it spreads, well, then everyone in that relationship will get it. Unless theoretically two people aren't sleeping together, but they're in a relationship. Which, if it's a marriage, I mean, possible, but unlikely. Especially given how little people care about the wait before marriage thing anymore, unfortunately. But the fact is, those diseases spread a lot easier when people are constantly sleeping around. And that creates major, major issues. And naturally means those diseases tend to go up and thus increases the risk for everybody else. And of course, if you have a kid, well, a lot of those diseases are spread when people are born. So even if you didn't engage in the behavior, you may well have it just because your parents did, which isn't good. And of course, if you allow adultery in abundance, it functions similar to polygamy, honestly. Think about the old royals and how they would constantly sleep around with their ladies in waiting. Henry VIII especially did it a lot. And yes, it is natural light, so apologies on the front of constantly changing lights. Regardless, when you had it like the royals did, it functions similar to polygamy. And that isn't good. Because all those problems I mentioned in my video about the problems with polygamy apply here. They stack up and are arguably even worse because every single thing happens, but also you're breaking trust at the same time and demonstrating yourself to be immoral and lacking in restraint without gaining anything in return other than temporary pleasure. It is legitimately better to have multiple wives than to have one wife and then constantly cheat on them, because at least with the 5 wives, you know what you're getting into. You know it's going to be a polygamous relationship and there's going to be some jealousy. In the case of adultery, less so, and thus it creates many problems. And of course, there's the obvious bit about restraint. It reduces it and encourages a pattern of further lecherous behavior. Think about it. If you're constantly sleeping around for your own pleasure, are you really restraining yourself? No, you're doing the opposite. You're ignoring your restraint. You're enjoying yourself in a debauched lifestyle, irregardless of your own interests. And so, you do it again and again and again. Like any addiction, or any poor behavior that gives a dopamine reward. You thus continue to engage in such debauchery, and you get worse and worse at restraining yourself. It essentially leads to a worse situation for you and everyone else, because you are now less restrained, your cravings are likely worse, because again, engage in an action enough, you get used to it and you want more, and of course, there's the obvious fact of who is willing to trust the person who constantly sleeps around. Very few. And so adultery, fundamentally, hurts everything and everybody, even if you don't know it right away. Now, I'm not going to suddenly say all adulterers should hang or something like that. No, that'd be insane. Sometimes people do bad things. Sometimes people do good things. But it's not something that should be encouraged or actively celebrated. It is something that should be acknowledged as a bad thing, discouraged, and treated as such. It's not time to suddenly basically kill everyone, because that is stupid. But instead, it is definitely time to discourage it. To as much as you can. Because if you can discourage it, well then, the opposite is true of what I've listed. The risk of spreading STDs is lower. There's less polygamy. Lecherous behavior is less likely, self-restraint more encouraged. People are less likely to be viewed as pieces of meat because they're getting to know each other. They're actually caring about the person they're engaging in relations with. And the contract's upheld. People fulfill their ends of the bargain. trust is established and reinforced. Relationships are strengthened. People benefit from that massively. And so, that is what should be done. Not doing adultery. We must acknowledge its problems, discourage it, and act accordingly. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.